If the Chinese Republican period, which lasted from 1911 to 1949, is examined closely, it clearly represents the end of more than 2,000 years of imperial rule and the beginning of modern China. It was not a calm transition, rather, it was a turbulent era marked by revolutions, political chaos, wars, ideological clashes, and intense imperialist pressure. During these years, the Chinese nation was forced to confront modernity, nationalism, and a wide range of internal and external challenges, often all at once. The roots of this period lay deep in history: Western imperialist influence, the structural weaknesses of the Qing dynasty, widespread corruption, and the repeated failure of reform efforts had already weakened the state. As a result, major uprisings such as the Taiping and Boxer Rebellions erupted, while mounting pressure from Japan and European powers pushed China further toward revolution. The old system could no longer survive. The Xinhai Revolution of 1911 finally brought the Qing dynasty to an end. Under the leadership of Sun Yat-sen, the Republic of China was established, and with it came the famous three principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and the people's livelihood. In theory, these ideas promised a new and just political order. In practice, however, they struggled to take root. China lacked a strong civil society, an independent judiciary, and a broad popular political base. Interim President Yuan Shikai adopted authoritarian measures to consolidate northern power, undermining political stability. Divisions between the North and South deepened, and under foreign pressure, China was forced to grant Japan significant economic concessions. After Yuan's death, China entered the warlord era from 1916 to 1928. Central authority collapsed, power fragmented among regional military leaders, and the absence of genuine federal cooperation intensified disorder. Rural China suffered the most. Injustice, heavy taxation, and recurring famines created fertile ground for communist ideas, while coastal cities remained relatively prosperous. On the global stage, the First World War and the Treaty of Versailles strengthened Chinese nationalism. Meanwhile, the New Culture movement from 1915 to 1920 and the May 4th movement, 1919, promoted modern education, democracy, science, and linguistic reform. These intellectual awakenings made Marxism increasingly attractive to young Chinese thinkers. In 1921, the Chinese Communist Party (CCP) was founded. Soon after, Sun Yat-sen reorganized the Kuomintang (KMT) during a period from 1923 to 1924 and formed the first united front with the CCP, aiming to achieve national unity against the warlords. Yet ideological differences, party military tensions, and Soviet influence weakened this alliance. Following Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek led the Northern Expedition from 1926 to 1928, defeated major warlord groups, and captured Beijing. However, the Shanghai Massacre of 1927 shattered the United Front, forcing communist leaders to retreat into rural areas. During the Nanjing Decade, from 1928 to 1937, the KMT established a government based on Sun Yat-sen's principles, but in reality, it functioned as a one-party authoritarian regime. It launched 5 encirclement campaigns against the CCP, ultimately triggering the Long March from 1934 to 1935. Urban areas experienced industrial growth, and women's participation in public life increased. However, the Shanghai Massacre of 1927 shattered the United Front, forcing communist leaders to retreat into rural areas. During the Nanjing Decade, from 1928 to 1937, the KMT established a government based on Sun Yat-sen's principles, but in reality, it functioned as a one-party authoritarian regime. It launched 5 encirclement campaigns against the CCP, ultimately triggering the Long March from 1934 to 1935. Urban areas experienced industrial growth, and women's participation in public life increased. Yet in the countryside, feudal practices and famine continued to dominate. Culturally, the New Life movement sought to counter communism by blending traditional values with militaristic discipline. In 1931, Japan occupied Manchuria and established the puppet state of Manchukuo, signaling an approaching major conflict. The Second Sino-Japanese War began in 1937 and lasted 8 brutal years. Millions were killed or displaced. The Henan famine alone claimed around 3 million lives. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. As KMT corruption and inflation eroded urban support, the CCP gained popularity in rural areas through land reform and grassroots mobilization. The Chinese Civil War reached its climax during the period from 1945 to 1949. American mediation failed, while the CCP consolidated its rural base. In the Huaihai campaign of 1948 to 1949, communist forces destroyed KMT armies within just 2 months and captured Nanjing in 1949. Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan in December, and the People's Republic of China was proclaimed. Overall, this 38-year Republican period was a complex mixture of political instability, ideological struggle, militarism, economic inequality, and profound social and cultural change. Experiments with democracy largely failed, yet the May 4th and New Culture movements succeeded in shaping a modern Chinese identity. Through immense economic, military, and international sacrifices, China strengthened its national resistance and sense of nationalism. According to Islam, wisdom is the lost inheritance of the believer, and wherever it is found, it should be claimed. If the Pakistani nation seeks to learn from China's Republican period, several clear lessons emerge from this history. The first lesson is that strong and stable institutions are the foundation of national development. Institutional weakness, unclear authority, and political disorder not only create internal crises and unrest, but also severely hinder economic and social progress. The second lesson is that excessive foreign influence and dependence pose serious threats to national sovereignty. Therefore, the state must maintain balance in its foreign policy and economic relations. The third lesson is that education, knowledge, and cultural awareness are essential for promoting nationalism and public participation, guaranteeing a strong popular base for political and economic reform. The fourth lesson is that only long term vision, continuous reform, and prioritizing national interest over personal gain can rescue a country from crisis and fragmentation. Thus, like China, Pakistan can pave the way toward progress through institutional strength, economic self reliance, social cohesion, and visionary leadership. By overcoming present challenges, it can achieve a stable and prosperous future. This is the greatest lesson of China's Republican era, and if the nation can truly benefit from it, nothing can prevent it from joining the ranks of developed nations within the coming decades.